So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is John from Taplytics. I'm the current partnerships manager here, and Taplytics is an optimization and experimentation platform focused on OTT, mobile, and web. I'll pass off to Ramsay and Stephen for a quick intro.
Hey guys, so I'm Ramsay Crooks, co-founder and CEO of CXperts, and CXperts is a customer or an agency focused solely on the touch points between and experience points between brands and the customers they serve. So our objective is to optimize those experiences and create awesome experience performance across all digital touch points.
And I'm Stephen Shyne, co-founder and COO of CXperts, and everything Ramsay said.
Great. And just a few housekeeping items here. So if you do have questions, please put that in the chat box. If you do want to have a larger screen real estate for the presentation, just double click on that. And then we do want to hear from you. So after the presentation, we'll have our contact details after. We want to hear about your customer experience journeys and how you're translating to experiments. And we're happy to connect and discuss as well. So we're going to go over our learning outcomes for today. By the end of today's presentation, we hope you can answer these 4 questions. So first one is how to define customer experiences and CX. So we'll be using CX interchangeably throughout the presentation. We'll be calling out if there's any other acronyms that look similar. A customer experience is what we're going to be talking about. Understanding why CX matters to your role, to your industry. Understanding and identifying CX insights, kind of differentiating what CX is and how you get to CX insights. And then more importantly, mapping CX insights into experimentation. So hopefully coming away with some ideas on how you can test. Perfect. So we'll first off start with the definition. So Ramsay and Stephen, how do you define customer experience?
I think it's a good way to set the stage, and this is a broad one. I think it harkens back to why CXperts exists overall. But the way we look at it is that customers don't simply buy products or services that they desire and need, but they also ultimately buy experiences. So improving experience performance is the objective of all of our efforts. In many cases, all of us that are listening as well. And so the way we sort of see that progression is that marketing builds up the promise of an experience. And the brand is, we could call the established promise of that experience. And then the interaction point is where the customer really continually is able to reevaluate that promise based on the performance of that experience for them over time. And in some cases, it's not actually that much time at all. It can be one experience that can define, that promise for that customer.
Got it. And for myself, I would say CX is the impression that customers have of your brand throughout the entire aspect of your user's journey, not just first hearing about it, but also the purchasing, onboarding, and even loyalty. And sometimes if you type in just metrics of customer experience, you might just get NPS score or customer satisfaction score, but it's a lot more than that nowadays. You have to think of some common attributes such as technical support, word of mouth, Google, reviews, blogs, vlogs, and even tweets. Right? So there's a lot to factor in. So for Ramsay and Stephen, what are some brands that come to mind that have exceptional customer experiences and any stories behind that?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind immediately, especially thinking about mobile on air, is Starbucks. Starbucks, the experience that they sell you is a consistent cup of coffee or whatever beverage you're purchasing at any location that you visit. So you're really purchasing consistency. Sure, you're purchasing coffee, but the driver behind it is consistency. And thinking about mobile specifically, there likely was an identification of a pain point that Starbucks found through either understanding their customers' journeys, thinking about that they arrive at a Starbucks location and then have to wait in line to place their order and then wait again to receive their order once it's made. And with the Starbucks app, you can order even before you arrive at the store so that you can cut out some of that wait time and get what you want faster. I think that's kind of the best example that comes to mind, really.
Yeah, who doesn't love a cup of coffee in the morning and ready to go, right? Click your fingertips, easy to go. I actually have a great story about one of our partners, Chick-fil-A. So we work with them quite closely. And one example I had was actually at an NBA game in Denver, where they actually had a partnership with the Denver Nuggets. And after Denver Nuggets scored an X amount of points, I don't remember exactly, there would be chicken nuggets from the rafters, parachuted down to the audience. It was actually incredible just to watch that happen. And it was really cool just because not only did they have a partnership in place with the NBA, but to see how this created a unique customer experience at a sporting event, but also because you had a coupon when you actually got the nuggets. You can eat nuggets, but you also have a coupon for next day experience via the app. So that in itself was a 48-hour experience for people just to be there and experience what Chick-fil-A had to offer. So it's kind of a cool, unique story that I had about customer experience. And then how has your online purchasing changed over the last few months? I've heard a lot of presentations talk about this new era of online purchasing. So any stories and anecdotes around that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, this is something we're keenly aware of just from a professional standpoint because we're really keeping a close eye on it. But I think just as customers ourselves, we're seeing and participating in a big acceleration in terms of adoption of digital interaction, digital transactions. I can think of just recently, I did a bunch of work in my backyard and ultimately gave myself what was diagnosed as tennis elbow, which was, I don't recommend it. But it's funny because the way I got that diagnosis is like, this thing keeps hurting. And so I made an appointment with my doctor, and ultimately they're like, do you want to come in or do you want to do a telemedicine appointment? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll do that. So, I'm sitting right here at my desk, just like I do every single day. And I'm explaining my issue to my doctor, who's on the other side of the camera in his little office with his scrubs on. And it was just so convenient. Ultimately, they told me I had tennis elbow, told me to get some ibuprofen and wait, essentially. But for me, I was like, wow, that was the easiest doctor appointment I've ever had. And then I went downstairs, got a drink, and went back to work. And I was working in 3 minutes. So I think being someone who's engrossed in digital, sure, that's pretty straightforward. But I think when you look at that going across our country and really across the world, with a lot of people learning technologies like this one or doing a lot of video-based meetings, we're just seeing a lot more, I think, comfort level with all sorts of digital transactions.
Yeah, and I think for me, something that I never expected to purchase online, and it's a good example and a good reminder that in times of change, certainly the past couple of months, I think has accelerated change that would have come, like maybe telemedicine. And in my example, it's something I never would have thought I would have purchased online, and that was a dishwasher. I actually purchased a dishwasher online. It was delivered. I didn't have to leave my home basically ever. So I was able to rate and browse ratings and reviews, browse different feature sets, filter those down to what I was looking for, and then have everything professionally delivered. So I think it's a good reminder in this time that customer experience is something that does change. CX is something that can kind of change either on the individual basis or through kind of larger environments like this.
Buying a dishwasher, that's crazy. And I think what's changed as well is just buying online and pick up in store. That's a new trend that a lot of companies, from quick service restaurants to retail to all that, have to adapt to. And it's really changed a lot for some of the brick and mortar stores that didn't really have an online interface or anything like that. So adapting that change and having new updates, whether it be new promotions, Black Friday sales, a lot of things have to be quick, very time sensitive. And all this talk of customer experience, why do you think it matters? Why is customer experience essential to this conversation?
Well, certainly customer experience can be a representation of your brand. It can be something that you can offer, and it absolutely can be a competitive differentiator. And that's something that kind of impacts the bottom line. There are several studies out there. One study to mention was by Digital Trends 2020 by Adobe and eConsultancy. And it underlines and highlights all the different ways that investing in CX, which is an investment in time and resources and energy, it provides value, and it really can demonstrate impact to revenue, cart value, loyalty, and several other metrics. So it is something to pay attention to and to consider in earnest to invest in.
And then also, I think, just speaking of studies, McKinsey & Company did a recent study that was quoted in, I think, some recent digital events that we were a part of. And it was really interesting because they looked back, what you mentioned, Stephen, was just looking at 2019, which was a year of, arguable high level of prosperity, especially in the digital space. But they were looking back at a recession, and they looked back at 07 to 09 after the financial crisis then. And again, the same number popped up. Leaders in CX were 3 times more able to generate returns for their shareholders than laggards in the space. And so I think it portends what we're probably looking at as we deal with not only an economic recession as a result of the pandemic, but also a huge adoption of digital services and product procurement online.
And understanding your customers' experiences is not a set it and forget it situation. It's something that should take some continual investment and involvement, in that things change. As we mentioned, experiences change. It can be large scale, global, socio-political, economic, environmental, all those have factors in changing customers' patterns of behavior and their expectations. The maybe best example is Amazon has set a new standard in customer expectations for shipping. It has to be fast and free. And now retailers, e-retailers specifically, have sort of two options, catch up or disappoint customers.
Yeah. And as you said, it kind of offers the competitive advantage. That's what it is. Now what customer experience is all about. And CX can develop a sense of trust, right? Trust with the brand. And it sometimes goes beyond the product, but you can think about the brand for a vehicle, maybe vehicle safety or durability for clothing. So there's a lot of things that CX dovetails into. So how does CX impact the brand? Any good stories around that?
Yeah, I think something that we just talked about, yes, it can be a competitive advantage. And it can impact not just the individual sale of that end user, thinking cart abandonment being tied to maybe frustration in the checkout process. We could also erode or totally evaporate loyalty. I think when while I was doing my dishwasher shopping online, I think, Ramsay, you had a particular experience with another online retailer. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. And it was kind of interesting. I think this is a time where a lot of people are looking at what they need to do around the house because they're stuck inside of them. And so, Steven's looking for a dishwasher. Obviously, that's necessary when your dishwasher dies. And I was actually looking for a new hedge trimmer. And I found what I needed. And it was a Lowe's product. And I bought it, or I thought I bought it online. On my phone, I just said, this is it. I bought it, got confirmation. Then I got an email saying my order was processing, and then nothing happened. And so I'm like, well, these bushes aren't going to stop growing. Like, eventually I need to deal with this. So I went to a Lowe's and asked the customer service desk, hey, what's going on with this order? And they looked it up. They found the order finally. And they said, well, this product is discontinued. We don't have it anymore. I said, well, then, why'd you take my money? And then that customer service experience sort of devolved into me having to check back in a number of times and ultimately going back again to the brick and mortar store, buying the product, getting home. The next day, the product that I bought that was out of stock showed up. So now I had two. So I had to process a return. And so, immediately it made me think, well, Lowe's doesn't have it together right now based on supply chain challenges of the pandemic. So I pivoted and have been going to their competitor down the street, Home Depot, since then, with a few exceptions. But I think just that one experience, really changed where I spend my money now, because I don't want to waste my time or my money.
Yeah. Now you have two, so you can go twice as fast, right? Yeah. A great example of what customer experience for us is working with our partner Host Party. So during the peak of the pandemic, where everyone was feeling a little bit isolated and there's some restrictions in place, there was an app that allowed for easy and fun video conferencing. And it really took a step away from what we see ourselves every single day on Zoom, on Skype, on Google Meet, and made it a little more interactive and humanized and add some empathy into it. You can actually join in and see who's online and drop into their house party, almost like you're going to a friend's place. And it was neat where you can actually have some online games and play together. And it just was a more casual and fun interaction, and really built a community experience. And that's what eventually a customer experience wants to be. You can actually get into that and have a team, have a family, have a group of friends all using it together, and you can converse about that. And that eventually is kind of where we're trying to get to as well. So with customer experience, CX, is that a marketing problem, a sales problem, product, or engineering? How do you think this is handled?
Well, I guess the quick answer is it's everyone's problem, right? But I think we can dig into that a little bit more. That customers don't care about the silos. If we think about it from a CX perspective, they expect them all to sort of respond.
Yeah, just thinking about that, if it's everyone's problem, it's sort of fire off an email to like 7 people in a group, and you can almost expect not to get a response in that case. And so because of the breadth and depth of customer experience, really, The only touch point is, that customer. And prior to very recently, it was very difficult to have a non-siloed interaction state. So if you're in engineering and digital, or if you're in customer service on the back end of phone calls, or if you happen to be in sales or product, I think all of those people have a completely different kaleidoscopic view of that customer. And so now I think with the advent and the proliferation of really strong technology that allows us to much more clearly see that journey over time across those touch points, now I think that each of those respective professions can derive insights from those respective experiences and do their part in supporting customer experience. And so it becomes the cornerstone instead of kind of the end result of a bunch of back office action. And I think that's what's bringing it to the forefront. But it still, I think, means that we need to derive those insights. And just because you can suss out data doesn't necessarily mean you can do anything with it. And so one of the things we like to say is the data does not equal insights. And I think that the proliferation of digital analytics and user behavior analytics often gave us a lot to measure and look at and ponder, but it didn't necessarily give us much or a confident ability to action. So we kind of look at data without insights as essentially just numbers. And a lot of analytics that serves the purpose of just generating numbers is essentially analytics theater. And I don't mean that to offend folks that work in behavioral analytics or quant at all, because I think there's huge aspects of that are critical. Otherwise, you can't really prove whether you're doing something right over time. But when we look at insight from the customer experience standpoint, and John, how you mentioned moving quickly against them, particularly in this day and age, we have to define insights as something that's actionable. And if it's not actionable, it kind of maps back to being potentially useful or potentially not useful data.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And a quick helpful reminder is the what is proposition. So insight has to be insightful. And sometimes a good way of thinking about this is Jeopardy and how you have to answer the statement with a question, what is? So asking yourself, what is a better way of onboarding? What is a better way of keeping your customers engaged? Or what is a better way of decreasing checkout abandonment? It does vary team to team. So depending if you're in product, marketing, or engineering, some of those actionable items, once you get, will further action in a different way, in different capacity. But as long as you have some of the data, understand how to use it, that will get the wheels turning.
So I think one of the big questions that kind of pops up, and maybe a nuanced question, so I want to ask you guys, is when we look at customer experience versus customer expectation, right? There may be a gap there, but they also kind of feel like they could just be the same thing. The customer's always right. You said that, Stephen. So are they? How do we differentiate between customer experience and customer expectation?
I think that's a very important nuance to help understand, and certainly I think something I mentioned earlier was, of course, Amazon setting new customer expectations that shipping should be free and fast. Well, customer expectations may always have a tendency to creep out that somewhere beyond what is feasible, responsible, or even practical. So that adage of customer is always right, I think that's not true. It's good to collect those expectations. It's good to collect voice of customer feedback, and know that some of those responses may be a strong vocal minority that could actually negatively impact your brand if you try to appease them too much. If you understand sort of their wants and needs and identify which align with you, your processes, people, technology, and the overall brand and the value you're looking to deliver, that's kind of the sweet spot. Hopefully that makes a bit more sense and adds some more color and clarity to that expectations versus experience.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it is almost muddled sometimes. But I think customer experience and customer expectations are not the same, but are relative. So companies are complacent with incremental improvements with the customer experience, just saying, hey, I'll try this or try B. And sometimes it starts with that. But customers' expectations are growing exponentially. And one reference we talked about is the brick and mortar stores, where before they didn't have an e-commerce or they didn't have a whole logistics and shipping channel. Now they are expected to. So whether it be supported and pushed by other competitors or whatnot, the expectations of customers are higher than ever, and they only get higher and higher. Things get faster. So getting the customer experience up to speed is absolutely crucial.
Definitely. I think I think these are all really great points, and I think the distinction between those two is one that we can take away and make sure that we continue to think about, because you can get carried away on either front and then maybe stop chasing the right problem. But I think I think one of the things we need to pivot to is how do you generate insights that are useful? And so obviously that's the theme of this talk, and we really feel that, from a CX standpoint, one of the biggest things that we can do these days on scale and relatively inexpensively as compared to the past is really procurement or deriving qualitative data, by way of either user recordings, session recording software is all over the place, and there's some great tools out there. Usability studies can be conducted a lot more easily than they used to be because, we're in a digital environment all the time. I think these studies and this qualitative data allows us to build empathy, and really it doesn't have to be this heavy lift. You can really start small with, let's say, your main user journey or the main objective of your digital experience, and then go from there and start to get into the corners of your experience, which may or may not be used very much. And they can help you either, get rid of feature bloat or add features where you see friction points. And that doesn't mean we don't have the need for quant or analytical data. I think some of the ways where we can use that information still can be in like funnel analysis and why drop-offs are happening. So we can spot the drop-off through the quant data, and then we can go in through qualitative session recording, let's say, and understand why and empathize directly with the user. And we're able to generate much more effective hypothesis on solving problems. Other ways are looking at like previous and next page paths and how people are moving back and forth throughout your website, and where there seems to be confusion or struggle within the consumer or the user. Pre and post customer service inquiry. Customer service is a huge cost center for everybody, and it's also a place where brands can really shine or fall down. And so why customer service inquiries are being made, whether that be by chat, we saw a question about that, so we'll hopefully be able to circle back to it, but also through phone calls or other forms of inquiry, can be huge in terms of alleviating those problems before they start. So ideally, we're not using customer complaints as our ombudsman or complaint box to fix our problems, but ultimately able to use qualitative tools to see what's going on before it turns into a wave of issues for your customer service team. And then I think lastly, just throwing a bunch of them out there, but recreating the conditions by which bugs occur, whether that's in a native app or in a mobile digital space or even on web. All those areas, I think, putting the onus on the customer to tell you what the situation was that led to an error or a crash is asking for a confusing conversation for all parties involved. And so I think using these session recording and user tools to really immediately recreate those conditions that you can immediately determine and prioritize a bug for a fix can be massively impactful in terms of customer experience improvement.
Great. That was great intel. And I'll talk a little about it in the next question, but user journeys is something that I think will help as well. So mapping some of the CX insights into experimentation, what are some strategies there?
I think one thing that definitely comes to mind is we at CXperts, we've had sort of an idea of how we want to measure potential effort with expected impact of certain activities. And a recent article by Nielsen Norman Group captured the thought or the concept that we've always had perfectly. And it was a refined, remodel, rebuild sort of breakdown. And if you identify that what you have is fairly acceptable, you just need to have it a little bit more high performing, maybe refine that experience with A/B testing. It's some pretty basic experimentation. You have a control and several test variations ideally, and you're looking to try to have your end users vote for which is the winning experience. Now, maybe it needs to be that the bones of the experience are there, but there's some fundamental workflows that need to be reimagined, or the overall journey needs a little bit of help. That's where you could go to remodel, and that's turning to a bit more advanced experimentation practices like multivariate or multi-page testing. And if you're looking at your site, your app, and you're just not adding as much value as you could, certainly with competitive parity, you may need to look at rebuilding. And that could be done through sort of a UX strategy, research, and design phase. Really, without CX insights, it's important to gather those CX insights to make sure that we're testing things that actually matter to both experience and performance. And furthermore, sort of without CX insights, we believe that you can't really test, you can't prioritize your tests very well. And then knowing what you're testing and why is a great way of building sound experimentation hypotheses.
It's great. And I think it all starts with building a culture of experimentation from the ground up and starting with good testing hygiene. So making sure that you have sponsorship and agreement from every level, understanding what you want to achieve. So there must be a good hypothesis for testing, making testing or testing one thing at a time, and maybe upskilling yourself. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of great content, a lot of great experiments, and there are resources like ourselves that can help you see where you guys are going, and where you guys want to be. So there's a lot of great things. And it sounds cliche, but there are no failures. There's just a lot of learnings along the way. And there's a lot of great brands out there that have done it before, and we want to make sure that you guys have that time as well. So I know we're coming up to the end of our presentation time. I think there might be a couple questions, Ramsay.
There are, yeah. I think a couple that I captured. One was, and this might be for you, Stephen, as well as you, John. This is from Matt. Matt recently wrote an article about the experience between PWA versus app, and would like our opinions on use cases and difference within usage and markets. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, I might want to noodle on that a little bit more and get back to you, Matt. We definitely will share our contact information, so make sure to stay in touch. One thing that I definitely wanted to touch on here is something you mentioned, John, is proper hypotheses. If we have a good hypothesis, it can iterate. And that's important in CX Insights, is to have insights bloom more insights. And then lastly is moving outside of just UI. Some of those button color, button copy tests are great, but really going towards, how are we communicating with users? What is the value that we're trying to offer them? Moving into more consumer psychology or consumer behavior, there's a lot of opportunities out there to help change the expectations of your communication, and that can really help make a positive difference with some of your tests. So yeah, as mentioned, we have all of our contact information here, and please feel free to reach out. You can also send us direct messages, I believe through the Mobile on Air messaging app as well. So we really thank you everyone for your time, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ramsay and Stephen, and from everyone here at Taplytics. Thank you very much for joining our session. We hope that we'll have the recording out shortly, but this has been a great day, and thank you for attending the last session of the second Mobile on Air hosted by Radar. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.